few halachas that need to be discussed and need to be understood about Sfiras Omer. So, for those of you that have been paying attention, every night, after Ma'ariv, there's been a bracha that's been recited, and then you count another day. We're currently on the 15th day of the Omer, which means that we started counting how many days ago?
How many days ago? 16 days ago.
Anyway, so let's have a look and see what we've got. Let's start at the very beginning and understand where the mitzvah comes from. The Torah in Sefer Vayikra tells us that every single person has to bring an Omer offering. Not every single, but that the Jews have to bring an Omer offering. What was an Omer? It was a measure of barley that had to be brought to the temple. And when was it brought? On the second day of Pesach. And it had to, then you counted for 7 full weeks until the holiday of Shavuos, and those are 49 days, but of course Shavuos falls on the 50th day, not on the 49th day, which maybe we'll take off a moment now and just talk about the numbers, because they're very, very significant. We've spoken in the past, we've certainly touched on it, that the number 7 represents the number of nature, so natural cycles. So you've got the creation of the world, and you've got the days of the week. Anything that's got 7, some kind of a cycle of 7 inside of it, you're going to be talking about something which has got a natural dimension to it. Any 7s that you can think of. So, for example, you shouldn't know from these things, but sitting shiva when somebody passes away. So the rabbis explain that passing away is just as much a part of life as living is. So it's all part of the natural cycle. The number 7 is always going to have that natural dimension to it. If 7 is nature, then 7 times 7 presumably is the epitome of nature. And we count 49 days, but we're not really counting 49 days at all. What are we really counting?
The 7 physical and the 7...
Oh my gosh!
Getting all Kabbalistic.
Avram, you saw you've I've forgotten it. These are the closet Kabbalists over here. I was thinking just more along the lines of that we're counting 50 days. Actually, I'm sorry. I don't mean to sort of bring this back down into the more physical realms. I really don't. But we've got 49, 7 times 7. But Shavuot is not celebrated on the 49th day. It's celebrated on the 50th day. We don't count 50 days because we don't have to. Right? Once you've counted 49 days, it's clear that the next day is going to be the 50th day. So there's no blessing and no count that goes together with it. But the concept is very simple. It really is. If the number 7 represents physicality, and 7 times 7 represents, I guess, the all-encompassing dimension of physicality, then the number 50, even though it doesn't divide into 8, it's gonna define everything which is what's called lamala min hateva, something which is beyond nature. And that's the day of Shavuot, and that's the day that the Torah was given, and that's the day that we really turn ourselves into an and we become a nation. And it's that the spiritual repercussions of Shavuot are something which we feel every single day, but as we count through the Omer, of course, it's got a very special dimension to it as well. So what are we counting? We're counting 49 days, 7 times 7. As you mentioned, there is a very Kabbalistic dimension to all of this, which again we'll talk about in Mitzvah Hashem when we have a little look at some of the history of what goes on inside of Sfiras Omer. But one of the things that is done is that we count different. Each week represents. There are, again, I don't want to get too involved over here. This is something you can discuss with Rabbi Omer at greater depth. But there are something called the 10 spheres, Sfirot. The Sfirot are different dimensions of our existence. They're very esoteric. They're very Kabbalistic. 7 of them are found down here in the physical realms, 3 of them are found in the spiritual realms, and the 7 weeks of Shavuot correspond to these 7 Sfirot that are found down here in the physical dimensions. And
leading up to Shavuot, not of Shavuot.
Not of, right, leading up to, thank you. And hello. And we've got, and each day inside of each week is going to represent a dimension of that particular concept, right? So each week has got its own theme, and each day inside of that week is going to have the theme that fits into the greater theme. And if you take a look, some people have the custom to recite lots of prayers after the reciting of the Omer, after the blessing and saying what the day is. And inside of those prayers, you'll see that you mention you mention which week you're in and which day of the week it is, to let you understand what kind of powers you're able to tap into, what kind of concepts you're going to be tapping into. Today, we can't bring the Omer, not yet anyway, Mitzvah Hashem, very soon we'll be able to bring the Omer offering to the temple. But in the meantime, we can't. Nevertheless, we are required to count the Omer every single night. You'll find the counting is you'll find it's easy at the end of Ma'ariv. You'll find a few pages that are dedicated to it in all Sidurim, and you can read it through and see what's there. Just practically speaking, when you come to make the blessing, you should stand up. The blessing should be said standing up. And again, some people have the custom to recite psalms afterwards and all kinds of prayers afterwards. Some people don't. Whatever you do, it's going to be okay. Some people have the custom to recite an introductory prayer beforehand, before the blessing is recited. Some people don't. Whatever you do, it's fine. Really, there's no hard and fast rules over here. In general, each person should count the Omer for himself, which means you shouldn't be relying on somebody else to count the Omer for you. However, if needs be, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but if needs be, you can hear the Omer from somebody else. They can recite the blessing, you can recite Amen, and then it's considered as if you fulfilled your obligation to recite the blessing as well. And the good news is, for those of you who don't get on very well with Hebrew, that you can recite the Sfiras Omer in any language that you like. So any language that you can speak, any language that you understand, which looking around the room is not very many. Esperanto, maybe, I don't know. But whatever. Anyway, what have we got over here? Let's try to work things out, because it's the most beautiful idea. The Ramban, Nachmanides, explains that the period between Pesach and Shavuot was before the deaths of the students of Rabbi Akiva, was a very, very joyous time. It was all tied into the crops. Crops harvesting was taking place. It was a very busy time over here. Again, Eretz Yisrael was a very agricultural society, and crops were being harvested and brought into Jerusalem. And all of this was happening during Sfiras Omer. And the Ramban Nachmanides actually describes Sfiras Omer, this 49-day period, as being like the Chol HaMoed between Pesach and Shavuot. It's a very beautiful idea, right? You know that when we've got a longer holidays, for example, Pesach that we just went through, and Sukkot that we're going to have Mitzvah Hashem in half a year. So you start off with Yom Tov at the beginning and you have Yom Tov at the end, right? Festival days at the beginning and festival days at the end. But in the middle, you have something called Chol HaMoed. We did discuss at some point, we learned the halachas of Chol HaMoed together, I think, no? Chol HaMoed, it's a little difficult to define exactly what it is. It's a little bit of a Yom Tov, and it's a little bit like a regular day. So certain things you're allowed to do, certain things you're not allowed to do. The Ramban defines Sfiras Omer as being the period like Chol HaMoed between Pesach and Shavuot, an extended period of great joy, an extended period where everybody was busy involved in the agricultural side of life over here, and harvesting and bringing in crops and celebrating, and all of that culminated with the festival of Shavuot, which commemorates the giving of the Torah. Mitzvah Hashem, later on we'll talk about what happened on the way, because nowadays, I hope you're familiar, looking around the room, it looks like you're familiar, that there are certain laws of mourning now that we keep during this period of time, because Rabbi Akiva's students, there was an epidemic, and a very large amount of students died over this period of time. Mitzvah Hashem, we'll talk about that as well. In the meantime, when do you count? So we count from the second day of Pesach, and you count each night until we get to Shavuos. The best time to count Sfiras Omer is as soon as it gets dark, nighttime. So that's why it's been incorporated into the Ma'ariv service, into the evening service, and at the end, when we finish davening the Amida, and before Aleinu, in most communities before Aleinu, so the bracha is recited and the Omer is counted. However, the truth of the matter is that you can count the Omer throughout the entire night, from the beginning of nightfall until the breaking of the dawn, which means that if for whatever the reason you weren't able to recite the Omer, then you can recite it when it gets dark. I'll give you a basic example actually, which over here maybe is not so practical, but in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, it's very practical. On Fridays, Friday afternoons, Friday evenings, most communities in the Northern Hemisphere bring in Shabbos early. Right, so they bring in Shabbos whilst it's still daylight outside, and within them we've got a problem over here. What's the problem? Because you can't count the Omer for that Friday night because it's not nighttime yet. But on the other hand, you're not going to go out and daven Erev again because you've brought in Shabbos early and you've already davened the evening service. So you've got to be careful to remember to recite the bracha after it gets dark. I'd have you should have a little reminder somewhere. Put a note up on the fridge or something, or some people have like a little reminder on their telephone that it rings when it gets dark, so they know to make the bracha. Yeah.
Chabad.org just came out with an app that pushes an email before Maariv.
To remind you?
Yeah.
Oh, good, very good. Okay, I mean, the truth of the matter is, the more reminders you can get, the better it is, right? Unless you're careful to daven every single davening together with a minyan. So over there it's difficult to forget because obviously they're davening and you'll hear it being said out loud. But for everybody, it's not a bad idea to have some kind of an extra reminder somewhere, whether it's an app, which I'm not 100% sure what that is, but I'm assuming that I said that okay. Did I say okay? Did I sound like I meant what I know? Yeah?
An app?
Yeah? Yeah, okay. So it's whether it's with an app or whether it's with an alarm clock, a good old-fashioned alarm clock that will start beeping to let you know that you've got to say it. The earliest time to recite Sfiras Omer is from sunset. Now, you shouldn't really do it then if you can avoid it. You should really wait until after nightfall. Over here in Israel, there's normally a 20-minute gap, really an 18-minute gap between the two. In Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, there are greater gaps. It's got a lot to do with where you're sitting on the latitude and longitude, to do with how much of a gap there is between sunset and nightfall. But if needs be, you can recite the Omer. You can count the Omer from sunset. However, in all events, you need to be careful. One of the things you've got to be careful about over here is that when you tell somebody what the day is, right? Now, if you haven't counted the Omer yet and it's already sunset and somebody says to you, what day are we in? If you say to the person, for example, yesterday, if you said to the person, it's now the 15th day of the Omer, you've just counted the Omer even though you didn't make a blessing. Which isn't, that if you're going to make a blessing, it's a much better, much bigger thing to do. So you've got to be careful how you say what the day is. The best thing to do if you haven't yet counted the Omer is to say, yesterday was the 14th day, or yesterday was the 13th day, whatever day it was, and that way you're not counting the Omer for that day, because if you say the words, then you've counted the Omer even though you haven't made your bracha yet.
So you lose the mitzvah.
You lose part of the mitzvah, which means you lose the mitzvah in its entirety. Counting the Omer is a mitzvah. So even if you didn't count with a bracha, but you said today is the 15th day of the Omer, you have fulfilled the mitzvah counting the Omer, but you haven't been able to do it entirely because you didn't recite the bracha together with it. Right? So it's just something to be careful about. Okay, here's a little bit of halacha which I think will have no bearing whatsoever, no practical application over here in this august gathering. But what happens if someone were to make a mistake whilst they're counting?
That happens.
Not that I'm aware of. Not in this kind of a place, for sure. Not.
What happens if you don't know the day? Can you go up to somebody and ask them what the day is?
Yes, you can go up to somebody and say, what's the day? Again, you've got to listen to what they're saying, though, because if they've already counted the Omer, then they'll tell you today's the 15th day of the Omer, right? If they haven't counted the Omer yet, then they'll say yesterday was the 14th day of the Omer, right? But again, obviously over here we're talking about, righteous, pious gathering of the cream of Or Sameach over here, and the idea that any of you would possibly make a mistake when counting the Omer is ludicrous. possibly because none of you are actually saying it anyway. So, whatever. Let's have a look and see, though. I'm sure you may, actually, I was going to say, I'm sure you must have a friend who might make a mistake, but I'm looking around the room. I'm not convinced about that either, actually. But that's for other reasons. But whatever. What happens if a person forgot to count the Omer? Well, you can make up the Omer. Let's say, for example, yesterday night you forgot to count the Omer with a blessing. At any point during the day, today, you can say, today is the 15th day of the Omer, which is 2 weeks and 1 day, and you fulfilled your obligation without having made the blessing, and then tonight you can continue again with the blessing. In order to be able to make a blessing over counting the Omer, you've got to have a continual sequence of reciting the Omer, which means like this: if a person were to get through today and realize tonight that they'd forgotten to count the Omer yesterday completely, then they've lost the ability to be able to count the Omer with a bracha. They should carry on counting the Omer every night without a bracha, right, announcing what day it is, how many weeks and how many days inside of the Omer, but they can no longer say a blessing. For the whole of the rest of the Amidah. So again, let's do that again, because it should just be clear. If you remember, last night somebody forgot to make the blessing, but they remember during today that they didn't count the Omer, then they can count the Omer without making a blessing. They can say, Hayom Chamisha Sayoim Shem Shnei Shavuot V'Yom Echad LaOmer, and finish. They've done their bit, and then tonight they can continue again with a blessing. If, on the other hand, they get to Ma'ariv tonight and they suddenly realize, hold on a second, you know what? I didn't count the Omer yesterday at all, right? Then at that point, they've lost the ability to be able to make a blessing over the Omer from then on until the end of Sfiras Omer.
Whoa. Why?
Huh? Why is that? There's a very complex disagreement inside of the halacha about what?
Kabbalistic?
It's not Kabbalistic at all. It's very, very legalistic, actually, of how we're supposed to define the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer. Is the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer one long mitzvah from the beginning until the end? Which, if that's the case, then if you didn't make a bracha today, you can make a bracha tomorrow because it's all one mitzvah. Or is each day its own independent mitzvah, which slots together and brings you to the next day, which is, again, the majority opinion, that's what they're saying. And that means that if I miss out today, then I don't have that block, I don't have that day as an independent entity, and that means I can't make a blessing tomorrow, but I should keep counting the Omer nevertheless.
So according to the first opinion, that it's one mitzvah, why
Yeah.
bless every night?
Why do we make a bracha every single night? You're right. It's enormous fullness inside of the Meforshim, inside of the Rishonim. Huh?
Say the first time and that's only.
Yeah.
Finished.
Yeah. According to some opinions, that's something which is an opinion which is offered as being a possibility. It's not the opinion which is chosen la halacha though. This is la halacha. We're looking at every single day as being its own thing, and if every single day is its own thing, it needs to have its own bracha given before
I have
it.
another question.
Yeah.
What is the halacha in a case that you forgot to bless, but you hear the chazan? You daven Ma'ariv in minyan.
Yeah.
and you
Okay.
hear the
So the image is like this.
chazan count,
If you've heard the chazan
but
and
you
you
didn't
answered.
mean to
You
do
answered
the-
amen, but even though the chazan was mechaven, right, to fulfill the obligation of anybody who
So you able to continue to say bracha in the next time.
you can the question over here is what did you count or you didn't count at all?
No, I didn't count at all, but you hear the chazan.
If you didn't count at all, the problem over here is that the mitzvah is Sfiras Omer, which is if you counted
But the chazan counted, you hear him.
you heard him. Yeah, you know what? I need to think about it because over here, I don't know. The mitzvah tzricha is kavana.
So maybe the rabbi will continue.
I don't know. You know what? Let me think about it and look into it. I'm not sure.
Well, what about if you miss multiple days, but you keep doing it in the daytime?
That's okay, right? Which means that in theory, you could make a bracha today, and then tomorrow not make a bracha, and then make a bracha the next day, and then not make a bracha for a few days, right? But count every single day, and then whatever, huh? So long as you got to count. Yeah. You've got to count. If you're unsure about whether you counted, there's an interesting little chiddush over here, a novel little thing over here. If you're unsure about whether you've counted or not, so you can assume that you did, and you can carry on counting with a bracha on the next days that come afterwards. Now it's interesting because normally we say sofek brachot lakel, that if you're not sure whether you've made a bracha or not, then we rule leniently, right? And you don't need to make the bracha. However, over here we're saying that if a person is not sure whether they made the bracha last night, you can't remember, but you can work on the premise that, other nights you did make the bracha, there's no reason why you didn't make it last night even though you can't remember, and you can carry on counting. What do you do if somebody counted the day? There's an Indian over here inside the Theorem of counting the weeks and the days. So for example, last night we counted that it was 2 weeks and 1 day of the Omer. We say it's 15 days, which is 2 weeks and 1 day of the Omer. Right? Now what happens if somebody just said, Hayom Yom Chamesh say Yom LaOmer, and he didn't say that it was 2 weeks and 1 day as well? So if that's the case, he should go back and he should count again without a bracha. He should just make recite again that today is 15 days, which are 2 weeks and 1 day of the Omer, right? Just to fill the obligation. There is an interesting piece of halacha over here. I don't know if it's applicable to anybody, or if anybody's got any ideas about traveling, right? If you travel to the Far East, you're going to run into a problem, right? What problem are you going to run into?
If you're going, did you say what direction?
You're going to the Far East.
Okay, well, you're going to lose time.
If you travel to the Far East, you are going to, wait a second, are you going to lose or gain? You're going to lose a day, right?
Right.
Which means that you left here on the 15th day of the Omer, you traveled for 24 hours, and you got there on the 17th day of the Omer, right? Because you're crossing over the International Dateline, right? You all thought the International Dateline was one of those websites that you shouldn't really be going on, but apparently it's something else altogether.
The deadline, the international deadline.
Yeah.
This is makes sense about according to halacha.
Yeah. There's a whole big machlokes amongst the achronim of exactly how we're supposed to relate to the international dateline, whether we're going backwards or whether we're going forwards. There's the opinion of the Chazon Ish, which is based on early authorities, beginning with Sefer HaKuzari, which is different from everybody else's opinion. But Lamaisa, what's the the international dateline is just an arbitrary line, which is drawn not even in a straight line, because if it was, it would cut off bits and pieces of the same country. But it's a line that's been drawn to differentiate. However, there very much is a halachic problem with traveling into places which are now either very much behind or very much ahead of the time zone that you're in. Which means that if you are traveling, you're going to end up, you can't, like I said, you counted the 15th day of the Omer last night, you get on a plane, travel for 24 hours, and you're going to get off, and they're already on the 17th day of the Omer. What do you do now? Well, unfortunately, if that's the case, you've lost your ability to be able to carry on counting with a bracha. Which means even though it was through no fault of your own, and it wasn't because you forgot, but because you were in a state of what, I don't know what you want to call it. You've moved from one time zone into another, and if that's the case, you should carry on counting now. You should carry on counting without a bracha. We'll get to Shabbos in a minute. Hold on a second. Stay with first Omer for a minute. What about the other way, right? Which means that you're traveling now from Asia back into the northern hemisphere somewhere, right? Yeah. What do? Which means that you left on the 15th day of the Omer, you traveled for 24 hours and arrived on the 15th day of the Omer, right? What do you do now? So over there, that's a lot less complicated. On the day that you arrive back, you count without a blessing the 15th day of the Omer together with everybody else, even though you've already counted it once, right? You now count it again. And then the next day you begin counting again with a bracha when you get to the 16th day of the Omer together with everybody else, which means that you're following everybody else according to the community that you've moved into. That's what you're following. You want to know what goes on with Shabbos? Shabbos is complicated. There is a very famous story that took place when Yeshivat Mir left. They managed to get out of Europe during the Second World War. That's just a little. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but it's a little tidbit of Jewish history, which is really quite bizarre. The Tsar in Russia insisted on building what was called the Trans-Siberian Railway. And it's thousands of miles worth of railway where thousands of people lost their lives building this thing, and billions of, I guess rubles, but billions of everything were poured into this thing, and nobody understood what the function of it was. But he had this thing that there had to be a train that went through the entire empire and came out at the other end, and nobody understood. It was put into place, a little bit before the Second World War. It was finally finished. They were finally finished, and Yeshivas Mir actually used the Trans-Siberian Railroad to escape out of occupied Europe and through Russia into Japan.
So kind of like the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, but it was just overground.
Yeah.
And they got to a place called Kobe in Japan. Now Kobe is very far east, and there was a great big discussion about Yom Kippur. The discussion spills into Shabbat. When are you supposed to keep Shabbat? What day is, which day is it over here in Kobe in Japan? According to some opinions, a majority opinion was that you should follow the week according to the rest of the world, which means that when the rest of the world is celebrating Shabbat, that's the day that you should celebrate it as well. However, there was a minority opinion headed by the Chazon Ish, who was one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish world in a little less pre-Second World War, but post-Second World War. And he was of the opinion that not like that. He said that you should follow Shabbat according to wherever you are and not according to everybody else. And there were all kinds of differing opinions inside of the community in the Mir. Some people kept Shabbat on Saturday, some people kept Shabbat on the next day, because that's what the Chazon Ish said you were supposed to do. I have a cousin whose father told me that he remembers Rav Chatzkel, the Mashgiach in the Mir, Rav Chatzkel Levenstein, walking through the streets of Kobe on Shabbat, on Saturday, wearing his talis and tefillin. Right, in order to show everybody, he felt that the Chazon Ish's opinion was the correct opinion, and he felt that was the correct. He wanted to show everybody that's what they're supposed to do. So, what are you supposed to do when you get to places like that in Kobe in Japan? When you get that far east, what are you supposed to do? Well, like they say, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There were 3 different approaches that were kept for Yom Kippur. Some people kept Yom Kippur on the same day that was being kept throughout the entire world. Some people kept Yom Kippur the next day, according to the ruling of the Chazon Ish. Some people kept 2 days because of the concern that maybe...
No one of them have minyan.
Huh?
No one of them have minyan.
So they fasted 2 days straight?
They fasted for 2 days, yeah.
If you cross the border, the timeline in Shabbos, you happen to stop Shabbos.
There's an interesting thing. There's a little place called Tasmania off the coast of Australia, which is actually connected to Australia at low tide. So when the sea goes out, there's a sandbar that connects the 2 places. And Rav Moshe Sternbuch, one of the greatest halachic authorities from our generation, ruled that Jews should not go to Tasmania on Sunday. Right, because of this concern, that Tasmania is on the other side of the International Dateline, and if you move over from Australia into Tasmania, it could be there's a concern that you're moving into Shabbos, even though it's not your Shabbos anymore.
So
maybe it's Shabbos over there.
You're able to keep only 12-hour Shabbos if you start the Shabbos in Tasmania and back to Australia.
So he said, what's the pshat? Why they asked? Because Sunday's a day off, right? Sunday's a day off in the rest of the world. That's just not over here. And obviously lots of people want to go. Tasmania is very beautiful. The beaches are very beautiful over there, and it's a wonderful place to go and spend time over there.
Don't care about Shabbat so much.
No, chas v'shalom, perish the thought. Don't be moitzi laz. I'm sure there's plenty of beaches over there they can go to. There's miles and miles worth of beach that they can go to where they don't have to be concerned about seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing. But Rav Moshe Sternbuch said that Jews should avoid going to Tasmania on Sunday because of the concern that they're walking into Shabbat, even though it's not Shabbat for them because they already had Shabbat in Australia.
Thank you for using miles.
Huh?
Miles. Was I the only person that heard that? use miles instead of kilometers.
I do. You see, obviously everyone else was just either not
They're so
listening.
used to
No,
it.
no, couldn't be. They were just accepted it as
Transcript.
being understood, right? Yeah. Okay, let's have a look and see. We've got the 49 days of the Omer, which up until a while ago was considered to be festive days. It was considered to be like the Ramban, like Nachmanides says, considered to be like days of Chol HaMoed. And now all of a sudden here we are today in a state of semi-mourning. And let's try to work out what's going on. So as I'm sure you're all familiar, there is a very sorry period in Jewish history. The Gemara in Yevamos and Daf Samach Beis, Amud Beis, says that there were 33 days within the Omer where 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died. The Gemara actually describes the deaths of the students of Rabbi Akiva as being a greater disaster, a greater calamity than the destruction of the temple. Because the destruction of the temple was a building made out of bricks and stones, however enormous it was, however much of a calamity it was, the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva were the future leaders of the Jewish nation. Yeah.
4 survived, right? 4 or 5?
Well, we'll get to it in a moment. Hold on a second. What is interesting is that the Gemara doesn't call them 24,000 students, rather he calls them 12,000 peers. 12,000 chavrutot.
48. Which one is 48?
What did I say? 12,000, I'm sorry, 12,000. What did I just say?
24, no?
Oh, stop listening, honestly.
Maybe I didn't do it.
I think
Miles.
you said it right.
Miles. Miles!
Kilometers.
Pounds! I'm sorry, let's do that one again. The Gemara does not say that 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva died, but rather 12,000 zugot, 12,000 chavrusas. Huh?
All of them
They were all
supposed
going to be leaders in different capacities, which means they were going to be spiritual role models for everybody around, that's for sure. Obviously, only a few of them were going to be elevated into the position of being Gedolei Ador, the leaders of the generation, but all of these people, the ones that were going to be the foundations of the next generation, the spiritual dimensions of the next generation. The Gemara says, why did they die? They died because lo nagu kovod zeh b'zeh, that they didn't interact with each other with the correct respect. Now, we need to understand this very carefully, because if we would have been there, we would have looked at what was going on and we wouldn't have seen anything untoward whatsoever. We would have seen, people respecting each other, and we would have seen people very much getting on with each other. And yet the Gemara describes them as lo nagu kovod zeh b'zeh, that they weren't treating each other with the correct respect. So, Rav Shimon Shkop, one of the great rabbis in the pre-war generation, he explains like this. He says, "What was the problem?" That's why the Gemara describes him, Rav Shimon Shkop. He explains that's why the Gemara describes him as being 12,000 zugot, 12,000 peers, 12,000 chavrutot, and not 24,000 students. Because what was the problem? The problem is like this. He says like this: in order to learn, everybody can learn from people who are greater than they are. That we don't need to understand that one. That's clear, right? We can even learn from people who aren't as great as we are. So every now and then they'll know something that we don't know. It's not a big deal. It's not some kind of a reflection, a poor reflection of your own standing, that somebody who is of a lesser status than you are was able to teach you something. But he says that the hardest people of all to learn from are our peers. Which means if we're all supposed to be on the same level and he knows something that I don't know, then that how can that be? If we're all on the same level, how can that be? So he explains that the problem over there was that because they had difficulty receiving one from the other. Again, if we would have seen it, we wouldn't have seen it. We would have just seen people sitting and learning together. We would have seen people getting on with each other. But apparently there was some kind of a flaw over there in the interaction that existed between them. And that caused this terrible, terrible calamity to take place between the period of Pesach and Shavuot.
What was their demise?
A disease. There was a disease. They didn't have tsaras. No, they had a disease of which, according to some of the Mefarshim, is described either as being diphtheria or a disease of the throat. Something called askara. Right? Again, what is it exactly? I don't know. Something very, something that stops them from being able to speak and finally causes them to die. It's interesting here. How's this? A little quiz. Are you ready? Fingers on the buzzers, right? What were the Jewish people learning when they left Egypt and were traveling towards Har Sinai? What were they learning before they were given the Torah? These 49 days that we're in right now. What were they doing? Huh? Pirkei Avot, possibly.
What are they learning?
Yeah. Which means there's no Torah to learn right now. It hasn't been given to them. So what exactly are they doing whilst they're preparing themselves to reach the level where they're ready to receive the Torah from God? Musa, right? What are they learning? They're learning Derech Eretz. Right? The Torah says Derech Eretz Kadma La Torah, that the Derech Eretz respect preceded the Torah itself, which means that what were they doing? They were learning how to interrelate with each other. They were learning how to live together as a cohesive unit. And only after they reached that level were they able to receive the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which means that if you've got a group of people, students of Rabbi Akiva, who were not able to reach that level in this particular time period, it makes perfect sense why they lost their lives now and not at any other time during the year. After Rabbi Akiva lost his 24,000 Talmidim, after these 24,000 students had died, and you have to understand they weren't centralized in one particular place, they were spread out throughout the entire land of Israel, learning in different places all over the place, but throughout the period of the Omer they were losing their lives. He then started again. He took 5 students who hadn't been involved in the original groups, and he started teaching them all over again. The most famous of all of those students, of course, was somebody called Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. No, I'm not that old, thank you. Right? Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, is famous for having introduced the Zohar, the Divrei Kabbalah, the very esoteric dimensions of the Torah into the world. He was he went and hid in a cave for 10 years. Together with his son, Rebbe Elazar, they completely detached themselves from the physicality of the world, and from there, the esoteric dimensions of the Torah came into being. They left, but they ate, the Gemara says, they ate carobs, and they drank water. But in this, carobs.
Carobs taste terrible.
Yes.
Carrots.
Not carrots, carobs, with a B.
Arabs that are carrots.
No, a carob is it looks like a great big bean, but it's dark brown and it's got little seeds inside of it. And the truth is that it's used in health places. It's used as a chocolate substitute, right? Because it does share some similarity to chocolate. Certainly the way that it looks. It's used for cooking with, but it's very basic, which means it's like we're talking about the real bare necessities. They ate carobs and they drank water. They didn't have Coca-Cola anywhere.
What like douche or like challah didn't do?
They subsisted on
multivitamin. Because I'm pretty sure they would have suffered from malnutrition.
Yeah, and they also had whey to build up their muscle mass, right? Just to make sure that for sure. And it came in great big tubs because when you're in a cave for 10 years, you gotta stock up on this stuff, right? It said the Gemara says they left the cave after 10 years, and they were both so full of spirituality they couldn't understand why anybody would be wasting their time on physical things, and everything they looked at, they were burning it all up in their spiritual. It was like it was wild. That a voice came out and said to them, "Go back into the cave again. I didn't send you out of here to destroy my world. Go back inside again." They went back into the cave. They learned for another 2 years, and then they came out again. And this time they were able to control things. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai didn't set things on fire. His son still did, but because he had Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai to keep him in check, It was a way of making sure the world wouldn't be destroyed.
Is this cave accessible to us today?
It's it's somewhere up north. I don't know where it is exactly. I'm not sure anyone knows exactly where it is, but it's definitely somewhere up north. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, is buried in Miron, which is just past Tzfat. Anyway, Rabbi Akiva started teaching these 5 students. He transmitted everything that he knew to them. I once heard a beautiful idea. Rav Yudah Segel, the late Rosh Hashiva in Manchester, writes that one of the ways that we see the greatness of Rabbi Akiva was after having lost 24,000 students, which you can imagine was the largest yeshiva in the annals of Jewish history anywhere. What did he do? Instead of going into depression and cutting himself off from everybody, he started all over again with just 5 Talmidim. You can imagine what the difference must have been, right? And yet, all he saw was the importance of transmitting Torah from one generation to the next. And the 5 students are the students who are going to be the transmitters. They're going to be the ones that are going to pass the transmission from one generation into the next. That's the Torah that we have today. On the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, what do? So the morning practices are held in abeyance. For some people, let me start again. There are different approaches as to when you're supposed to mourn. Some people begin the morning practices from the beginning of the Omer, which is from the 2nd day of Pesach, and they keep going until the 33rd day of the Omer. Some people start on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is today, and they keep going for 33 days, right, which will bring them to within 3 days of Shavuot. Got to keep 33 days of mourning. The Arizal, his opinion was that you have to keep the mourning practices from the beginning until the end for the whole 49 days, because once you've excluded all of the days of Chol HaMoed and of Yom Tov and of Shabbos and of Rosh Chodesh, there are 33 days left inside of the whole of the Omer, which are not festive days, and therefore you should keep the days of mourning from the beginning until the end. Again, whatever you do, it's going to be fine. However, according to all opinions, on the 33rd day of the Omer, everything is held in abeyance. There's no mourning on the 33rd day of the Omer. Lag BaOmer. Lag is Lamed Gimel, which is, Lamed is 30 and Gimel is 3. The idea over here is something, again, what happened on Lag BaOmer, it's not 100% clear. According to many opinions, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed away on that day. It was a natural death. It was much, much after everything that took place with the death of the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva. What we are doing is that we are commemorating, we are celebrating the continuation of Torah existing here in the world. Yeah.
I've been invited to a wedding.
Oh, I was just going to say, good. Let's have a look and see, right?
Okay.
Hold on a second. Mourning, it's a period of mourning. What are you not supposed to do in a period of mourning? You shouldn't be listening to music, you shouldn't be shaving, you shouldn't be getting a haircut, and you shouldn't be getting married. You can get engaged, which is good news.
On the 33rd day?
Hold on, no, I'm just talking about in general, in Sfiras HaOmer. One second. Sorry, I should have been clearer, right? During the Sfiras HaOmer, during the period of mourning, those are the things you shouldn't be doing, right? So you shouldn't be getting a haircut, you shouldn't be shaving, shouldn't be listening to music, and you shouldn't be getting married, yes?
What about a cappella music?
We'll talk about it in a moment, right? Hold on a second. You can get engaged. That's the good news. So for all of you who have been thinking to yourselves, you should wait until after Lag BaOmer or until after Shavuos. You don't have to wait. You can get engaged today. You can get engaged right after this class. Not now, after this class, right?
You should wait outside.
You should just get used to that, right? On Lag BaOmer, it is permissible to get married on the night of Lag BaOmer, which is why you've been invited to a wedding. Last year on Lag BaOmer, I was invited to 5 weddings. It's a very popular day to get married because once you get engaged, if you get engaged before Pesach, with not enough time to get married before Pesach, so now you're stuck, right? And you've got to wait until Lag BaOmer. That's the first opportunity there is to get married.
So all 3 opinions that you talked about?
According to everybody,
Wow.
you can get married on Lag BaOmer because all of the laws of mourning are held in abeyance for the day of Lag BaOmer. So you can get married on Lag BaOmer, you can go to the wedding, even if you're keeping the Omer from Rosh Chodesh, Iyar until the end, or according to the Arizal, even then you can go to the wedding, you can enjoy yourself over there, you can listen to the music, and you can dance, and you can have a wonderful time. It's 100% okay.
What about on Rosh Chodesh, like today? Can we listen to music?
No. You shouldn't be listening to
Well, do
music
what?
at all. Huh?
Thursday,
Don't.
not for-
Shush. Okay. Shush. Here, a cappella music. Right? What is a cappella music? You can get some very, very talented people who are able to sing together in a way you don't even realize that there's no music. They sing so beautifully together that it sounds like it's got musical accompaniment coming with it. What do you do with a cappella music? So the evidence is like this. According to the halacha, you're not allowed to listen to music during Sfiras Omer, which means that you should be able to listen to a cappella music. The question over here is whether it's the correct thing to do according to the spirit of the law, right? Everybody here understands you're not supposed to listen to music because music is something which elevates the soul and it brings joy. A cappella is something which does the same thing, right?
This you. This
Huh?
class also make the same.
Well, this only through
Jokes and
through the koyach of Shena. That's all. It's not.
So what's that? So what you can, you can't.
So I'm saying like this. I'm not telling you what to do, right? I think that there is no halachic problem with listening to a cappella music. If somebody would have asked me what do, I don't listen to a cappella music either because I think that that's really the spirit of the law is part. I think it's a part of that as well. But again, you should do what you want. There are from CDs that have been brought out with a cappella, especially for these times of the year. And again, whatever you should do, you should do. Yeah.
It's about shaving.
Yes.
If you want to be prepared for Shabbos, in order to prepare for Shabbos, you want to make yourself more, in a way, presentable.
More beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yes.
And you shave.
Yes. So I think in your case it's not going to help. So no, your beauty is so obvious.
Inside, not out.
No, it's so obvious.
Okay,
It
thank you
doesn't
so
matter. It's interesting that there is one opinion according to Rav Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, the Rav in America, who he was of the opinion that it was permissible to shave on Erev Shabbos in honor of Shabbos. It's a minority opinion. The vast majority of the halachic authorities are of the opinion that you should not be shaving on Erev Shabbos at all, unless if you've got a situation which is not going to be this year, if Lag BaOmer falls out on Saturday night, which is not this year, then it would be okay to shave on Erev Shabbat in honor of Shabbat, rather than shave on Lag BaOmer night, which is going to be on Saturday night. It's as if it's saying that Lag BaOmer is more important than Shabbat, which for sure is not true. Yeah.
Does that mean that you can shave on Lag BaOmer then?
Yeah.
Why are we mourning some students that died that have no relation to us?
Oh, but they had the most tremendous relationship to us because, like I said before, the Gemara says that this was more of a disaster than the destruction of the temple, because we're talking about the most enormous amount of Torah that was taken away from us and leadership as well. Which means that even though it's hard for us to relate to something that took place so long ago, we're still feeling that loss, even though we can't really relate to it in a simple way, that's for sure, but we're still feeling that loss today. The good news is, for everybody, it is permissible to buy new clothing during the Omer. There is no problem with buying new clothing. There's no problem with reciting Shechianu over new clothing as well. You can wash. There's no prohibitions whatsoever with regards to washing yourself and washing your clothing as well. Right? It's not like the 3 weeks, which is we're more stringent. It's permissible to make a shechianu over food as well, which means to make a shechianu over fruit, right? If you haven't eaten fruit since its previous season, thank you. I know it was one of those complicated words, right? Then you can make a shechianu over the fruit, and it's absolutely okay to do that during the Omer. There is one opinion which is stringent and says that you should wait to do it on Shabbat, right? And then on Shabbat to make the shechianu. But again, it's a minority opinion. The majority opinion is that you can buy new clothing, you can wear new clothing, and you can make a shechianu over over fruits or over foods on during the Omer as well. Yeah.
I have something about music. I went to a bar mitzvah on Thursday night, and of course there's music there. And I asked a rabbi, what am I supposed to do with regards to
Maybe in bar mitzvah you allowed to do it.
What I heard is that Rabbi Yosef said that if the bar mitzvah is celebrated on the day that
Right, Bobby, yeah. Right, and especially
Also Brit Milah?
a Brit Milah.
Never been to a
It's bar
Maybe the
mitzvah.
Brit Milah that has music. I don't know. There's that.
Sometimes, yeah, I was in a
celebration.
Yeah. The pshat is like this. If it's a sudat mitzvah, right? So the day that the boy becomes bar mitzvah, that's a sudat mitzvah. Many bar mitzvah boys make a siyum as well over something. So then for sure it's a sudat mitzvah. According to all opinions, it's a sudat mitzvah.
What about Siyum?
It's
That's a
like
good
a-
idea. Siyum. If I finish a Masechta, I could have a celebration.
In theory, yeah.
With real music.
What if I go to a Siyum?
Yeah.
So it's all have like a lineup.
It's interesting. Even if you yourself are not making the siyum, but if you're a party to it, I guess pun intended actually. But if you're a party to it, then you don't have to be concerned. It's like going to a wedding. Somebody goes to a wedding on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, for example, right today.
Oh, Rosh Chodesh.
Even though they've started keeping the Omer, but the people getting married are only going to start keeping the Omer from tomorrow, right? So then at that point, it's okay for you to go, even though for you're keeping the laws of mourning, it's okay for you to go to the wedding, and it's okay to enjoy yourself over there, and to dance, and to listen to the music, and it's not a problem with regards to your keeping the mourning. If you're making a bris milah during Sfiras HaOmer, so if you're the father of the baby, or if you are the moel, the person who's doing the circumcision itself, or if you are what is known as the sandek. The sandek is one that holds the baby during the circumcision. All of those people are allowed to shave in honor of the bris milah. Right? And this last halacha over here, which I don't imagine is applicable to any of you in any shape or form whatsoever, but a single girl who is, perhaps of marriageable age, so she wants to look her best in order that people should suggest shidduchim, may be allowed to cut her hair. She should ask
Only
her
girl?
local...
What about boy?
Huh?
What about boys?
You shouldn't be going out with boys.
No, I'm talking about cutting hair.
No, I talk about like shave.
No. No?
So girl allowed, boys not.
Yeah.
Why?
Exactly. Because
Because I think the truth of the matter is that the less she sees of you, the better it's going to be. That's what I think. So.
Right, two questions. One, what if your job requires music, meaning a DJ, or
Yeah, I think again
Or
a
a
DJ
singer.
is a little bit of a problem, I think. But for example, if you've got somebody who's working in an all-male gym, right? Let's keep these things. Try to avoid all the various halachic problems
You
over
play
here.
like, let's say-
Oh, you're working. You know what? You're working in a store, right? You're just selling in a store. Most stores have got music that's being played the whole time, right? So for sure, you don't have to give up your job in order not to listen to the music.
Also for you, it's not so enjoyed.
Yeah, you're not really, you're not really listening. Very often people ask, can you go to the gym, right? Can you go to the gym to exercise? There's always music playing in the gym, right? Is that okay? So the answer is, yeah, you're not going to listen to the music, you're going to exercise. It just happens to be that there's music playing in the background, so that's okay.
Rabbi Lauffer, prior to the calamities with Rabbi Akiva's students, and in times like every seventh year of Shemitah, you had said that it was a more joyful in the barley offerings and everything. What happened during Shemitah? What did they do?
They were sitting and learning. You know what? I don't remember. The Mishnah asked the question about whether it was brought during Shemitah. I have to ask one of my 12-year-old kid. He knows this Mishnah is better than I do.
it's always the kids.
That's
that
for sure.
know them
For
better.
sure.
Yeah.
But the problem is they become older after they grow up and
And then
they're not
know
kids
better,
anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Did you had a second one?
Yes. Well, what if, let's say, you're an attorney or something, and you need to go stand
Yeah,
in front of the
so
judge to
again,
shave?
I have a brother who's a doctor, it's forbidden for doctors to grow beards whilst they're working. Which, if you've got a pre-existing beard, you can keep it on for work, but you can't walk around looking unshaven. And I don't know what it's like in America, but that's in the hospitals in England. That's those are the rules. What are you allowed to do? So over there, for sure, you'd be allowed to shave, right? But you shouldn't shave on days that you're not working. So, for example, if you don't work on Friday and Shabbos and Sunday, and you're just working from Monday to Thursday, so Monday morning to Thursday you would be shaving. But when you get to Friday, you're not working anymore, then you shouldn't be shaving, right? Days that you don't need to be in work, you don't have to shave, and that's the correct thing to do. Okay, good. I think we're going to stop over here, Mitzvah Hashem.